Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Welcome to The Ray Taylor Show, where I bring you reviews of the latest movies and TV shows, as well as classic and foreign films. I'm your host, Ray Taylor, and on this podcast, I'll be talking about all things film and television. Whether you're looking for a new show to binge or want to know if that blockbuster is worth the trip to the theater, or just want to hear my thoughts on a classic or foreign film, I've got you covered. So join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for new episodes, and let's dive into the world of film from television, with the world of film and television together. Let's dive into them together. On today's episode, I am talking about a film that came out in 1993, independent film entitled Totally Fucked Up. This is written and directed by Gregg Araki. May have pronounced that wrong. One of the stars of this is James Duval. In this film, you have six queer teenagers struggling to get along with each other and life without... let's start over. This is this movie. You have six queer teenagers struggling to get along with each other and with life in the face of varying obstacles. That was way more difficult than it should have been. In an effort for me to expand my film knowledge, I tried to explore new areas of film that I have massive blind spots in, whether it's important films and subgenres that for whatever reason I am ignorant to, have not seen. More recently, I've started trying to explore a lot of those blind spots, including Indian films, not just the Bollywood films, but a lot of Indian cinema I've been diving into. I've been watching a lot more musicals and westerns and classic films, which are all blind spots that you've only seen a few here and there, but genres that I just, for whatever reason, never gravitated to. And I've fallen in love with so many great films in those genres, subgenres. So one of the reasons I love doing this show, just doing movie reviews in general, is that it motivates me and inspires me to seek out these films and talk about these films that I have not seen yet. And one of the big areas is queer cinema, is one of those subgenres or cross-sections of films that I've seen a few here or there, but it's like it's a lush genre collection of films that exist that are telling very unique stories, and I'm trying to make an effort along with these other genres to do that. And this film fits in that. Not that I haven't seen some that, important films in this space in the past, but really diving into, I guess, more obscure stuff that's not just mainstream. Really diving into that subculture of films. And while browsing Criterion Channel app this past week, looking for something to watch potentially for the show, I came across a collection of films that is associated with the Sundance Film Festival that just took place in Salt Lake City, Utah. Is it Salt Lake City? Regardless, Sundance Film Festival, a bunch of movies. One of the films in that collection was titled The Doomed Generation, and is a film title that I've heard, I recognize. It's just a movie, one of the many movies that I've never seen that I've heard brought up many times. And I looked at the description, right? I obviously recognized the title, so I read the description just to see if it would be a movie that I'd like to watch and maybe review. And while reading it, I learned that it was the second film by Gregg Araki in his quote-unquote teenage apocalypse trilogy, which for me, I love reviewing films that are in a series, usually small franchises or groups. Like if it's a new director that only has a few films out, I love watching all of those films to just really dive into the psyche of the director. If it's small franchises or series of films, quote-unquote series of films, I love doing that, like this 3-film series. So I decided this is perfect. I'm going to watch the first film in the series, so I haven't watched The Doomed Generation yet. But the first film, which is this film entitled Totally Fucked Up, which is a movie. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I love when I come across something, it makes perfect sense. I totally want to do it. I'm excited to review these movies and watch these movies. And then I go look at the availability of these movies, and this movie was not available anywhere. It's not available to rent or buy or stream anywhere, at least the services that I had. Thankfully, we live in this crazy time where there's a lot of ways to find movies. And I found this movie on YouTube, the full version of this movie on YouTube. It is not a great quality. It is VHS quality version, which it looks like a lot of aspects of this were filmed on VHS. So I don't know how much the original version, how much better the original version looked, but the VHS version was rough, especially watching it on my projector. It was a bummer, but I would love to see a restored version of this film. Not that this is like cinematically, I mean, like it looks like it was filmed on VHS, so I don't know how much more it would make it look better, but would have been nice to at least see characters' faces a lot better in certain scenes. But regardless, was able to watch it. Thankful I was able to watch it. I probably should have watched it on my phone instead of watching it on my projector, like low resolution on a very small screen. I probably would have appreciated the movie even more. Would have been less distracting. With all that said, though, if you wanted to watch an indie film that will transport you back to being 18, 19 years old in the 90s, this movie will do that for you. Which if you were a teenager in the 90s and you kind of long for that, and you don't really see it even in movies that are set in the 90s, they don't really transport you back in the way this movie does, especially if you're somebody that, I mean, this takes place in LA, but in Southern California, this just took me directly back to the 90s in a way that no other movie has done for me. Although, despite that, it's not a feel-good movie. Like, you know, it's cool to be transported and feel like it was what it was like in the 90s, but this is not a feel-good movie by any means. But it does capture that time and place very well, I would say. Let's take a brief intermission from our show. Imagine, dear listeners, a piece of art that does more than just decorate a wall. Visualize owning a limited edition print from The Many Faces, a series that melds the beauty of the abstract with the allure of the surreal. Each print is a conversation piece, a slice of artistic wonder in your own home. But what really elevates these prints, they come with my personal signature and unique number, marking their authenticity and exclusivity. And guess what? Indulging in this art won't empty your wallets. Starting from just $5 for a 4x6 print, these prints are designed to be accessible, fitting both your space and your budget. To art enthusiasts, collectors, or anyone who cherishes one-of-a-kind pieces, this is your moment. Transform your living space with a touch of artistic elegance. Head on over to inspireddisorder.com to select your exclusive limited edition print today. And now, let's return to the show with that extra bit of inspiration. But this movie is a great indie coming-of-age film, you know, that captures the 90s in a way that brought me back to that decade more than anything I've seen in, like anything I've seen, period, probably. You know, what it was like to be 18, 19 years old in the 90s, kind of understanding relationships and new social dynamics in a way. It's like it's a weird time for a person's life, transitioning from like this high school life, this institutionalized kind of school, and then, you know, and then kind of being free in a way that you've never been free before. But because our main characters are all queer, they have added struggles that I never had to deal with in high school. I had to deal with just your regular bullying, but outside of high school, I never had to deal with anything. And in the 90s, especially in like the early 90s, which this took place, that, quality of life for people who were anything but straight wasn't the greatest. And we've come a long way since the 90s to where we are in 2024, but there's still aspects of that in certain places in America where it's dangerous because intolerant people exist. But in the 90s, it was very different. It was much more widespread, right? Much more threatening, life-threatening obstacles. Obviously, you have homophobia at the time was far more prevalent and in some cases met with violent reactions. Like the extreme homophobic people would, beat a lot of hate crimes, a lot of people just being beat up just for existing a certain way, which never ended, but doesn't happen at the level it did in the 90s. And then also you have the AIDS crisis that was going on at the time still too, which was still raging. And the effects of that, like the massive effects of that, really hit that community harder than other communities. But this movie also about dealing with depression, people in your community that have a high rate of suicide, feeling directionless as you do at that age, not completely sure about who you are and what you want to do with your life, really kind of doing the first kind of in like seeing who you really are outside of all of the structure that you came from, and having new freedoms. Your time is, you can do whatever you want now. And I mean, assuming you're not going to, if this is like the summer vacation after high school and then like before, if you're going to college, if that's your next step, if that's even the direction you want to take, which for a lot of people it's not. But you have, that added freedom that comes with being that age. And also relationships in general are so new and so different. They have such a different weight to them than they did when you were younger. But there's still that attachment to not having any real responsibilities, that attachment to what it was like being a kid, growing up, playing with toys, hanging out. Right? It's a time when life is just kind of starting to get really exciting. And there's so much potential. And you're full of so much energy at that time, right? Everything is so heightened because so much of it's so new to you. Very interesting time and place for this movie to be taking place in. And it's like in this movie looks and feels a lot like a documentary, using a lot of like kind of found footage type of stuff, right? It seems like found footage stuff, interviews with the friends, but it's just like one of the characters has a camcorder on him at all times, and we get a lot of that footage along with footage that's not that, but everything looks like it's kind of filmed on a kind of a camcorder of some sort. But a great time machine back to the 90s, for sure, especially for that age. Let's take a quick break from the show. Listeners, are you ready to take your experience with the Ray Taylor Show to the next level? Dive into Inspired Disorder Plus. For just $5 a month, you unlock a world of premium content that's sure to satisfy your every entertainment and artistic craving. Imagine enjoying The Ray Taylor Show, a full week of episodes completely ad-free in both audio and video formats. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Get exclusive access to the live painting archives, be the first to lay your eyes on the many faces, and enjoy members-only discounts and deals that'll have you coming back for more. With a treasure trove that includes a podcast back catalog boasting 14 unique shows and over 600 episodes, personal insights through my personal blog, creative writing to spark your imagination, and an interactive Ask Me Anything section, Inspired Disorder Plus is a feast for the curious mind. Ready to elevate your entertainment game? Head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus and become a member of an exclusive club. Dive in, indulge, and inspire your senses. Now let's get back to the show. But I do want to talk about spoilers. It's a great movie, kind of a hangout movie, but there's specific things that I want to talk about, and I don't want to spoil for anybody. So if you haven't seen this movie, head on over to YouTube. At least that's where I found it. Look up this movie. Watch it if you want to watch it before you get spoiled, but this is your warning. This movie starts with suicide is highest amongst gay teens. So it really sets the tone and gives you an idea of what this movie may be about, but also lets you know what life was like at that time. You have almost these talking head type interviews, right, on VHS of these friends, which their performances feel like kids of the time being interviewed for a documentary. It really feels like that. But then there's also moments where these kids are clearly acting, and you can tell they're clearly acting. So it's like, it's very interesting how there's moments where for these performers didn't feel like they were performing, and others times where it's clear they're getting lines out. But most of this movie, very much just hanging out with these different people and seeing what their lives are like at this time in their life. Talking about what's in culturally, what's in and what's out, what's popular, what's not popular. And eventually, talking about all the things that are in, which is kind of sad how similar that list is to today, or at least aspects of that list. And kind of transitions into talking about gay sex. The term butt fucking I have not heard probably since the 90s, and was great. One of the many aspects of this movie that, like, if it was a movie made today about the 90s, you probably wouldn't have that detail. There's so many details because this was made in the 90s about kids in the 90s. There's these details that you don't see in every other kind of movie or TV show that's about the 90s. Like, they feel like it doesn't feel like authentic like this movie does. Like, when you hear butt fucker in this movie, you understand the authenticity of the character in using butt fucking. You have one dude talking about how disgusting a dick going into the place where shit comes out of is, and then it immediately cuts to actual anal sex, and also cuts to two guys clearly jerking off to watching anal sex. So this is like a movie, like, right off the bat, clearly trying to make people who aren't open-minded just explode, like their minds would explode. Like, conservatives of the early 1990s, their heads would explode if they saw the opening to this movie. And I kind of appreciate that. I kind of appreciate movies that are almost like trolling. Like, they know they're going to get brains exploding on the intolerant people who may... Like, I can't see why any of them would come across this movie, but it's clear that they wanted people to walk out of movie theaters disgusted at the beginning of the movie, because it's really just the beginning of the movie where that is. Like, this is like not a movie that has a lot of sex in it. It's about teenagers kind of just hanging out and trying to figure out what life is. But I kind of love that scene of, like, we're going to hit you with this right away. We're going to test your tolerance right away to see if you're even worthy enough to stick around with the rest of this film. Kind of punk rock to, like, we're doing this to piss people off kind of a thing, which I appreciate that mentality. And it's interesting to hear and see what culture was like in the 90s, right? You have gay people are more accepted in the 90s than they were in the 80s, but still homophobia is definitely rampant in the 90s. As we even heard, it's like so commonplace that they use all of the slurs that get hurled at them constantly amongst their friend group. Um, Whereas now would be far less of that, I would think, because there's no need to take those words back. Because most places you're you don't have that. You're not dealing with that level of hate like you were back then. But also the risk of AIDS at the time being basically at the peak. You have one of these characters who I loved this moment. She like calls the Republicans Nazis, which is like I guess they've never changed ever, right? That she refers to AIDS, the AIDS epidemic, as or a genocide. She refers to it as the Nazi Republicans' wet dream, because this disease only kills people through premarital sex and needle drugs, right? That's what that's totally makes sense. And for so many people, that's what it seemed like. Those were the only people affected. Um, it's also, fun seeing these kids doing ecstasy, which was a popular, the rave scene was kind of a big thing in the 90s. Ecstasy, a big part of that. Um, One of the kids has dreams of having kids of her own, and she's into women. So it's like, has this dream of someday, I don't know how it can happen, but someday I wish that I could just have kids with this woman that I love. I know it's not possible, but that's like the dream that I have. And like we're living in a time where like that dream is possible, way more possible and common than it was back then. So it's interesting from a perspective of today to go back to the 90s and see what at the time was just a dream. Like, how could this even happen? And it like slowly, even though it's not like the fact that it's probably getting fought in every red state currently in 2024, that there's Republicans that would love to turn the laws of this country back to a time where it's illegal for them to have children and to raise children. At least for now, we are at a place where that character's dreams could come true. We also get the teenage logistics of relationships. I mean, not only in the queer community, but just kids in general. And the fact, like, at the time, there's no cell phones. This is like pre-beepers. The only way to get a hold of anybody is through a phone, right? That person needed to be home. You needed to know their number, and then that person needed to happen to be home when the phone rang in order to get a hold of them. They did have call waiting, which was a fun technology that this movie makes fun of, the lack of reliability in that technology, which is another joke that was used to great effect in Seinfeld as well, trying to switch lines and realizing that you didn't actually switch lines. Very happened a lot in very very regular comedic scene in any movie or TV show of the time involving a phone and a second line. At some point, somebody's going to be talking about somebody behind their back or lie to somebody and instantly get figured out because they actually didn't switch from line to line. There's a clip of a priest on a TV saying all the hateful things about gay people that sadly sound exactly like the way conservatives talk about trans people today in certain areas of the country. It's always the same hate. The hate has always been the same from conservatives, whether it's trans people of today, the queer people of the 90s, or the black people of the 60s. It's like conservatives have always used the same exact game plan. The same exact, like, oh, they're abusing your children. They do the most evil things to kids, like making you scared of this group of people, this marginalized group of people, because they're somehow going to be bad for your children. They're going to somehow ruin society. Is the exact same thing that the conservatives have used, whether they've been labeled as Republicans or not. The people who have conservative values have used the exact same game plan throughout history. And it's just sad. It's just so sad that it's just like, you know, new year, new targets, pretty much. Every decade, they find some other marginalized group to target as the reason why they don't live a perfect life for some reason, right? To go back as far as like the witch hunts that took place, where religious organizations were killing massive amounts of women for no reason other than because they assume they're witches. Somebody said they're witches, then they're going to eat your babies. It's been the same thing, and it's just so sad. Religious conservatives have always been the most evil humans throughout history, and that will never change. Not to say that there aren't good religious people out there, but the history of evil in this world, a lot of that's come from religious organizations. Of course, in this movie, there's also, shows that there's physical violence. You have the fear of AIDS, but also the fear of just being beat up because you are a certain person, because you live your life in a certain way that's different from somebody else's, right? Hate crimes, which still exist, but, not to the level. I think there's a lot more safety today than there was before, especially certain states, maybe less so than others. But I would love to see in hate crimes, I would love to see a breakdown of the political affiliations of people who commit hate crimes. Because I have a feeling that it would be from a certain political or ideological perspective that is the most likely to commit hate crimes. Not to say that everybody maybe commits hate crimes on both sides, but I would say the vast majority of hate crimes are considered by people who have conservative values. I would put every penny I've ever made in multiple lifetimes on the fact that the majority of hate crimes are committed by conservative people. And not just, people with conservative values specifically. They can identify as whatever they want to identify as, but guaranteed they have conservative values, which is very sad. And this movie, the way it ends, it's kind of got an ambiguous ending, but I'm almost positive that the end is like these friends all watching this video of their friend Andy. Like they're watching a video of him like during one of these kind of talking head interview type deals. And they're all sitting there watching this, and then they turn it off, and it's clearly symbolizes that this kid, who was depressed throughout this whole movie, didn't really even fit into the situation that he was in, like just wasn't happy with anything and just couldn't, like just nothing worked out, and it felt dark. It was a dark place for him, and and how this movie starts with like, highest rate of suicide is in teenage LGBTQ people. And for this movie, of course, it's going to be about one of them that's no longer going to be there. It's going to take their own life. And it's just, it's a movie that's at the time discussing a lot of the things that threaten the livelihoods of these people at the time. And sadly, still affects people in a smaller subset of that group. And it's based on this hate that comes from this like fraudulent morality, this cult behavior, this hate that comes from these particular people that just never go away. These people that somehow think, these conservative values that think that like their selfishness and hate are somehow better for humanity. It's disgusting. But I love this movie. It's not the greatest movie. It's rough. It's rough. It's raw. But it transported me back to the 90s. It's tragic when people but it's discussion of like its portrayal of depression and what it looks like on the outside. I think it nailed it, right? Because it's tragic when people are in this constant emotional pain, right? They're always suffering. I've dealt with depression on and off throughout my entire life, right? And I remember being a teenager, depressed, like ending things was on the table for me on some level. And other times throughout my life, things have gotten dark and felt like that was the only way to stop this internal pain and this emotional suffering, and especially at that age in those situations, nothing ever seems like it will get better. You're forever doomed to feel the same way. But, as I've experienced not doing that and continuing and finding ways to survive, life is a crazy ride. Sometimes you have to just keep living long enough and you start to see things can change. And it becomes a bit of a roller coaster. It's not like just things get better and then they're just fine forever. There's ups and downs. There's ups and downs, at least for me, and I'm sure for most people, things happen in life. But if you know it's a roller coaster, then it's easier to get through those low moments. There's still going to be new lows, like the depression you felt when you were, you may never feel that kind of depression again, but you will feel like different, completely different, much more heavy depression. You may have amazing moments of those years of your life when you're in your 20s, but you'll find like even bigger moments in your life later on that you didn't even know could be, the lows can get lower, the highs can get higher, but it's a constant up and down thing, and in time, and with help, you can survive. And it's hard to make that happen. It's hard. I have, so much sympathy. I know too many people that have killed themselves, and I have to think that on some level, I'm happy they're no longer suffering. Selfishly, I'm sad that they're no longer here. But I know what that suffering is like on some level. And to know that that suffering is ended for them, it's sad that that was their only way to end the suffering. Let's put it that way. And this movie also reminded me a lot of Reservation Dogs, which was a great show, just finished 3 seasons on FX Hulu, which that's about kids, these native kids living on a reservation in Oklahoma, which is another subsection of our community, of humanity, that has a high rate of suicide as well, and is an aspect of that show. That show starts off with one of the friends having committed suicide and seeing how these kids are dealing with that. And then further seasons, you're seeing how that happened to their parents and how that trauma has trickled down, So you see that related trauma in these two different communities, which, this movie is great. Reservation Dogs is amazing. It is one of my favorite shows from last year, and one of my favorite shows that I've seen. And I'm excited to see the next film in this series, The Doomed Generation, followed by the final film in the series, the 3-film series, Nowhere. So I'm looking forward to seeing the other the other teenage apocalypse movies, and see how this director grew as a director, and see the different stories it tells. But I want to thank you all for tuning into this episode of The Ray Taylor Show. I do hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this film. Totally fucked up, Don't forget to tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for new episodes and new movie, TV show reviews. And join the conversation by leaving a comment or rating on your favorite podcast platform or over on youtube.com/inspired disorder, where everything's available in video formats. Until next time, enjoy the show.
Subscribe to The Ray Taylor Show on YouTube and everywhere podcasts are found. Binge the full week ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Purchase Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.